Every year across the world, disasters cause widespread devastation and human suffering.
When you look at the data across the world, there is an increased tendency towards or the disaster incidence is increasing across the world, not just in Sri Lanka, which is attributed mostly to climate change driven changes that are taking place in the planet, which changes rainfall patterns that leads to, in certain areas, greater flood proneness, and in other areas droughts. And also when you have a lot of rain, it triggers landslides.
Sri Lanka is no stranger to disasters. The island nation is susceptible to a range of natural hazards such as floods, landslides and sea level rise, with disaster incidents and frequency increasing during the past few decades.
Impact of disasters have been recorded in social as well as the economic level. So economically, last 2-3 years, basically the economic has been impacted by disasters, particularly in 2016, 2017 as well as in 2018 drought. So in the flood we experienced that direct damage and losses, but in the drought like slow onset disasters we are experiencing huge lot of losses. But the indirect losses, these are also very huge, but nobody is estimating these indirect losses. The direct damages also is a very huge, and 2016, 2017 we have done a very comprehensive post-disaster need assessment. In this post-disaster need assessment we calculated the damages and losses. Those are billions, and as a country it is very difficult to bear.
Mitigating the impact of disasters through disaster risk reduction or DRR measures is key to ensuring a more resilient nation. Ecosystems provide cost-effective natural buffers against natural hazards and impacts of climate change. Sri Lanka's ecosystems and green infrastructure can be effectively used in DRR planning to minimize the impact of disasters.
Ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, as the word implies, has two parts, eco and DRR. Eco means working with the environment knowledge and environment systems. And the disaster risk reduction part is to understand the risk and understand what you can do and come together as different stakeholders and working towards to minimize the risk. We have other climate-related disasters. Most of them can be mitigated using mangroves, because mangroves can take the energy from the sea waves and things like that and then absorb it and prevent the damages to the inland.
Another example is sand dunes, often found in coastal zones. Sand dunes not only prevent sea level rise, but also high winds damaging coastal areas. During the tsunami of 2004, in areas where sand dunes were in good quality, the lives and property damages were minimal. Furthermore, sand dunes can store fresh water in lenses within the dunes. For example, in northern Jaffna, sand dunes help to provide most of the water to Jaffna Peninsula. It also keeps the groundwater level up, minimizing potential seawater intrusions due to climate-induced sea level rise.
Eco-DRR examples are plenty. In different ecosystems, there are different type of examples. Now, if you take wetlands, wetlands can take the flood water. When the water is coming after rain, the wetland take the water and then prevent flooding. Then it recharges the groundwater slowly, and then it probably prevent droughts in certain areas.
Look at what is happening across the world. These cities, as when they grow, there is greater pressure on the wetland to convert the wetland, because the land value goes up and people are looking at a very short-term benefits that they can derive, and there is a tendency to fill the wetland and convert it into part of the city. Even in Sri Lanka, over the last 3 or 4 decades, we have lost 40% of the wetlands in the city of Colombo. Now that makes us more vulnerable. because our storage areas are reducing and we have a lot of built up area. So you have a dual problem. On one side, you increase your vulnerability by having more and more population. So at a given disaster event, the number of people affected will be high, therefore the magnitude of the disaster will go up.
Natural systems in Sri Lanka have been effectively used to address disasters such as climate-induced droughts and floods. The tank cascade system is an ideal example. Ancient kings created tanks to capture the northeast monsoon. There are over 10,000 tanks in the dry zone, oriented in a way to capture these rains. The tank density increases as we come into the country, as the amount of rain reduces so as to capture and store more water. Once this water is captured and stored, it is important to reduce the loss of that water. Therefore, the tree cover around tanks or gaskommana is vital as it prevents the wind touching water, effectively reducing the evaporation. Furthermore, village tanks have many other components that support to control the ecosystem services to people, plants and animals. It is one of the best ecosystem planning examples in Sri Lanka, which is also unique. For example, Kattakadua or interceptor at the lower end of the tank absorb the salts that are harmful to paddy crop. Windbreak reduce water evaporation, and drainage canals take away the poor quality water from the paddy fields through wetlands where the water is cleaned again. The Kapiriggama Cascade Tank Restoration Project is a case in point that has brought drought relief to communities through the restoration of a traditional tank system.
After having a lot of studies, understanding of these past experiences, we selected the Kapiriggama Tank Cascade system. Then we thought of having a good plan not to do all this physical rehabilitation but also to take care of the whole environment which we had in the past. We have to take all these catchment and the tank, then the command area and also all these other surrounding environment. People really participated in a very active manner and they understood what we talked to them and we learned from them a lot of things. So this participatory approach has been much effective.
With climate change, the impact due to high-intensity rainfalls will increase. These high-impact rains can increase soil erosions, which causes soil particles to be removed from the surface where these particles move with rainwater to downstream locations. This mud or silt can fill up our tanks and reservoirs. For example, if the erosion continues, the tanks and reservoirs that we use to obtain water for drinking, irrigation, and power generation may get filled with mud, and their ability to hold the required amount of water will be reduced. Already, large reservoirs like Kotmale, Victoria, and Rantambe are under this erosion threat, and new reservoirs such as Muragahakanda may soon face the same problem. Therefore, it is vital to conserve the central hill slope with proper eco-DRR measures to minimize erosion, which will help with both droughts and floods.
The Kallan River Basin in Sri Lanka is the backbone of the Sri Lankan society and the economy. Why I am saying it is, it provides water to Greater Colombo area, that's about 5 million people. That's about 20% of the population if you take it. The water to the people drinking and also some water goes to hydropower generation. And then we have 3 industrial parks taking that water. Then there are many other industries. There are 10,000 small and medium industries in the Kallan River Basin, all connected to the livelihood. Now, imagine a situation that water in not that quality is not there anymore. So we have a huge challenge in drinking water, challenge in livelihoods and industry. The beauty of that is, it is not that bad yet, but if we take action now, we can have the continuous ecosystem services coming from the Kallan River And in order to do that, we need to understand and apply the eco-DRR principles into the landscape in Canal River. The erosion controls has to be more strengthened to do it. And especially in the urban areas, we need to work on the urban settings and have more green cover so that the high rainfall impacts will be minimized, and the temperature increases coming from the climate change is also controlled, giving a lot of benefits to the urban areas, not only the temperature reduction but also the savings in the energy.
In addition to helping minimize disasters, ecosystem-based DRR measures provide several other benefits. They help conserve biodiversity while providing livelihood opportunities for communities. However, many of the ecosystems that provide ecosystem-based DRR services are increasingly threatened in Sri Lanka due to a number of factors, including unplanned development activities and unsustainable practices.
Removing trees, bad drainage management in the upper slopes may be the major factors caused to these disasters, because starting points and triggering points. If we can avoid these bad habits from our nature, I think we can mainly protect our land, because when we put thick forest in the slope area, in the upper slope, I think there may be a control of the water flowing.
The topography of Sri Lanka is cone-shaped, with the central hills located in the middle. This decides how we face climate change and how we manage water. In the center, we need to have maximum fog interception to obtain rain from both southeast and northeast monsoons. For this, a good tree cover in the central hills is needed. Once the rain is captured, it is important to ensure that this water does not run off to the streams and then quickly to the ocean. To do that, the water needs to be infiltrated to the ground, which is called groundwater recharge. Ecosystems with good soil conditions to absorb water helps in this process. For that, we need good soil surfaces with organic matter, a good condition land with proper management, especially in plantations and hill slope areas.
You know, if you take about in Sri Lanka, the housing construction, vehicle consumption, and the food consumption, and different type of the modern lives, all these are part of the consumption. So we call it in a way symbolic consumption or consumer culture. So this will create a huge impact on the environment. Sometimes we try to consume more environmental resources, solid waste generation. It's a kind of a impact from consumer culture. So then indirectly that can create a problem of climate change.
When ecosystems are degraded or made unavailable, it is expensive as well as difficult to substitute. Therefore, we should value the goods and services that they provide to understand the value of protecting ecosystems for disaster prevention. Innovative financing as well as technical measures are needed to ensure the use of green infrastructure to successfully implement eco-DRR measures in Sri Lanka.
As a way of supporting disaster risk reduction is something that needs to be taken up, which is not being taken up in that way. One of the primary reasons is that you don't know the value of that, and people have ideas about it, and not knowing what it would contribute is something that needs to be done. We are getting that is possible, but it's a process. When the ecosystems are intact, the areas which are prone to disasters are much lesser, and after disasters these areas also can recover faster when you have intact ecosystems. So this is something that needs to be further taken into account by way of estimating how much it would contribute in terms of minimizing damages. So there are mechanisms of doing that, making use of some of the environmental economics tools which are available everywhere. One of the issues relating to not taking these things into account is people don't see the value of it. Most of these things are also common property resources where no individual people responsible. So everybody is trying to take maximum out of a given thing, leading to degradation of this ecosystem.
Despite the benefits and advantages of ecosystem-based solutions for DRR, there are challenges in mainstreaming eco-DRR into national DRR and other adaptation plans in Sri Lanka.
To mainstream eco-DRR in Sri Lanka, pretty much it starts with understanding the possibilities. The possibility, to understand the possibilities, you need to know like what type of disasters are on you, and then what happens when the temperature changes. When the temperature changes, the different type of plants growing fast, some are dying, some species are disappearing, some diseases like dengue and other things change the type behavior and the spread. So all these things has to be understood first, and then once you understand those things, one by one you have to come up with the solutions, and the solutions comes from engineering, the nature-based solutions, and many other research and places and technologies. In order to do that, you have to work together with the multiple stakeholders. You have to have the education, irrigation, agriculture, coastal, forestry, wildlife, everybody together, so that the solutions can be coordinated, implemented in a coordinated manner.
Ecosystem approaches can find solutions to minimize the impacts of disasters. It requires multiple agencies in government, UN, NGOs and communities working together, first understanding, then implementing, and most importantly, monitoring. It is also important to engage school children and communities in eco-DRR. The future custodians of our nation needs to be aware of the challenges from climate change, disasters, and environmental issues, and the ability of ecosystem and nature-related approaches to find solutions.